Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com/DanielSchiffer and use the code DanielSchiffer to get 10% off your first purchase. So on last week's video, I got what I think might be my favorite comment I've ever received on a YouTube video. It's something along the lines of videos are like donuts and effects are like sprinkles. If the donut is bad, no matter how many sprinkles you put on it, it's still gonna be a bad donut. But if the donut is good, some sprinkles here and there can actually make it an amazing donut. Now, I am a huge fan of donuts, both literally and metaphorically. I'll admit that on this channel, we do talk quite a bit about the sprinkles, and maybe we don't spend enough time focusing on the donut and making the perfect donut. But is there such a thing as a perfect donut? Probably. Today, I have one piece of advice that I think can make all of our videos better going forward. And that piece of advice, simply put, is to just raise your standards. Okay, now obviously this is easier said than done. So how can we instantly raise our standards or be more of a perfectionist or be a little more picky when it comes to shooting and editing videos? I've created a list of 6 very simple things that you can start doing right now to make all of your videos going forward better and better. So our first 3 tips will pertain to things that you can actually do in camera while shooting, and our last 2 tips will be about things you can do in post when you're editing your videos. So tip number 1 is about exposure. If you're ever unsure of what exposure to use, if the situation you're shooting in has a little bit trickier lighting, here's what you can do. Simply just capture the same clip twice using different exposures. Now, of course, if you're shooting an event like a wedding, this isn't the best idea because you're trying to capture candid moments, but for everything else where shots are planned out or you have the time and the flexibility to redo a shot, just get the shot twice, exposing it differently each time. So I'll give you an example. One time I was filming a scene where my subject was sitting in front of a window, and I couldn't decide, did I want my window exposed while the subject was a little underexposed, making it a silhouette, or was I going to expose for my subject, blowing out the highlights and the light coming through that window? In this situation, there's no right or wrong. It's simply up to your preference and your style. If you do get into a habit of doing this and shooting multiple exposures for the same scene when the lighting's just a little bit tricky, this will eventually make you more comfortable with your camera and getting the look that suits your style. And from doing this over time, you'll naturally get the ability to expose for different types of scenes without having to do multiple takes. Now, tip number 2 has to do with frame rates. A situation that I very often find myself in is when I'm grabbing a clip and in the moment, I can't decide whether or not I'm going to be slowing it down or if I'm just going to be keeping it at regular speed when I'm editing. Now, maybe you remember from my last video, I had this shot of my girlfriend looking through her camera, and I actually shot that clip at both 120 frames per second and then again at 24 frames per second. And I did this because I knew that when I was going to edit the footage, I could just try out both options and see which one I liked better. Now, I am willing to bet that there are several of you out there right now who are thinking, why not just shoot the entire thing in 120 frames per second, and then if you don't want to slow a clip down, just don't slow it down. And if you are thinking that right now, then that's the exact reason I'm making this video, to show you that you should raise your standards and strive to improve your videos in any way that is in your control. So in this case, if I know a clip I'm shooting is going to be left at its regular speed, I will most definitely want to film it at 24 frames per second. Now, there are 2 reasons for this. The first being this lets us maintain a more natural looking motion blur or a more natural looking clip because the shutter speed won't be as high. But the other advantage is that when I'm using 24 frames per second, I can shoot in 4K on my Sony a7 III. On my camera, if I want to shoot in 120 frames per second, this can only be done at 1080p. Now, there's nothing wrong with 1080p, and 4K isn't actually necessary, but if you have the option, why not take advantage of that extra sharpness? Now, I am well aware that these differences may seem subtle or insignificant, but believe me, if you become a person with this kind of attention to detail, ultimately this mentality will trickle down into other areas of your craft. This will make you improve. This is what makes you better. Now, moving along to tip number 3, and that is to not settle for a shot that you think is just okay. If you have the time and the flexibility on a shoot, keep redoing your shot until you're happy with how it looks. If you play back your footage and it's just a little bit shaky, try it again. And similarly, if the shot is just a little bit out of focus, try it again. Very often when I'm working on a video, I will repeat a shot 10 or more times until I nail it exactly how I thought of it in my head. Not only will this improve the quality of your footage, but this also gives you options when editing so that you're not just stuck with 1 or 2 takes. Tip number 4 is don't get too attached to your footage. Sometimes there is a shot or 2 in your edit that just don't need to be in there. I used to find that I was constantly getting attached to my footage and everything that I shot and wanting to put all of my clips into a video, but you have to resist that temptation. In your videos, you should always try to only use your best shots or just use the shots that are required to tell your story. Now, people are more likely to enjoy or actually sit through your entire video if you avoid repetition and fluff and all that excess stuff that doesn't actually need to be in there because it doesn't add to the story. Now, our 5th and final tip is a big one, and I've mentioned it in the past. Always try to be diligent when it comes to only using the best part of each individual clip. Now, 2 things you'll definitely want to pay attention to are your focus and your camera movement. Nothing should ever be out of focus unintentionally. If you're using autofocus, then try to cut out from your clip the parts of the footage where the lens is hunting and breathing, trying to grab focus of your subject. Now, you can avoid this problem altogether by just using manual focus, but if you are using autofocus, generally speaking, your videos will look a lot better if you cut out those parts of the clip that look robotic and jittery because the camera is looking for focus. It's honestly very easy for someone, even a non-filmmaker, to be able to tell that that focus hunting is not intentional. Now, when it comes to smooth camera movements, I always cut my clip before there's a shake or a jitter. Now, in reality, no one's hands are completely perfectly stable. You tend to get a couple of seconds of smooth footage before there's some sort of bump or shake, and that's the nature of filming handheld. Now, unless I'm actually going for that authentic handheld look with a very subtle shake, I always cut the clip before a shake or a jitter when I'm getting those smooth camera movements. So now that you're going to be making all of these amazing videos, you're going to need somewhere to put them. Now, on my website, filmer.ca, is where my viewers and potential clients can learn more about me and see past examples of my work and even get in touch with me with any questions or inquiries. I feel like too many people nowadays are relying on Instagram and social media as their main way of attracting new clients and showcasing their work, but if I'm being completely honest, most of my serious inquiries come through my website via the contact submission form. And one of the biggest advantages of using a website rather than social media is that you can take advantage of search engine optimization so that people who are actively looking for your services can actually find you. So no matter what type of business you're in or what kind of website you need, Squarespace has you covered because they have so many template options and layouts to choose from. So once again, start your free trial today at squarespace.com/DanielSchiffer and use the code DanielSchiffer to get 10% off your first purchase. But that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram at daniel.schiffer, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.